It is Friday on Daily Delivery. I'm Michael Rand. Glad to have you guys back for another day. Busy week, as you probably noticed on this podcast. A lot of extra episodes. Will be another one tonight off of Game 2. Chip Scoggin should be joining me post-game. That podcast will go up sometime after Game 2 of Wolves versus Mavericks in the Western Conference Finals. Another bonus podcast Sunday night, I do believe, off of Game 3 in Dallas. No regular show Monday morning because it's Memorial Day weekend, but we should be back at it Tuesday. Got to talk to Royce, but I'm imagining that'll be okay with him. And then away we go with the rest of next week and this series, however long it does go. Today's show, Bobby Nightengale from the Star Tribune joins me to talk Twins for the bulk of this. Just kind of what a weird year it's been for them, right? So much up and down performance-wise. Started off poorly, had that hot stretch, lost 7 in a row, got the rally sausage back, won a couple in a row. Now they're home for, I think, 6-7 games against the Rangers and the Royals. Opportunity starting tonight to kind of, start that second big stretch of good play to match 2 stretches of poor play and 1 longer stretch of really good play. So we'll see where that gets them. But Bobby and I will talk about the season, talk about kind of the pitching that has helped them so far, the inconsistent hitting, some of the storylines from the last road trip that had caught my eye and ear and things like that. So Bobby will join me in a bit. We'll take a look quick to PWHL Minnesota Game 3 against Boston. That's tonight, part of a really busy night, by the way. Wolves, PWHL, and Twins all home this evening, and 2 of those pretty important playoff games. So if you are planning your travel, especially to downtown Minneapolis with the Twins and Wolves playing tonight, plan accordingly. Get a Lynx in a little bit here. They lost their first game in controversial fashion to a certain degree. 1-point overtime loss in that one to Connecticut last night. First, though, what did I miss? We are going to start with the Wolves. No surprise there. Interesting time right now. I talked a lot on the last couple episodes, I guess, the bonus episode with Chip and then yesterday's regular episode with the Rachel Blount interview on PWHL Minnesota. I started out with some Wolves thoughts, just kind of talking about how they have been better responding to adversity than they have when playing with success, when kind of in the driver's seat. That's played itself out over the course of the year to a certain degree, and certainly in the playoffs, most illustrated by the Denver series, but also Game 1 against Dallas. They came in, they were the favorite. Everyone's like, okay, you got past Denver, here we go. Let's go to the NBA Finals. They dropped Game 1. They play poorly, I would say, in that game, and that was my impression. That was certainly head coach Chris Finch's impression. Sounds like he kind of played the card after Game 1, or maybe in the film session after Game 1, between Game 1 and Game 2, played the card, hey guys, we didn't play well. We got to get our act together card. It wasn't like it doesn't sound like it was just a mild upbraiding. It was more of a, hey guys, it's kind of now or never. And he's right. But you can't play that card every time. He chose to play it now. I think it's good because I think he understands the pulse of this team, understands, like I've said, how they respond to adversity, knows that they can take honest feedback. That's kind of been a hallmark of the entire season, not just from Finch to players, but from players to players. Said, hey, we got to be able to talk to each other about what's going right, what's going wrong. But I thought his message was interesting. Here's what he said. This was the beginning of his session on Thursday, talking about what he saw in Game 1 and kind of where he wants them to go from here.
Rough film session. I told the guys it's been a long time since I've been this disappointed in your effort, your performance, your attitude, your application, your attention to detail. It just wasn't there. Western Conference Finals started. I'm not sure if they got the memo. But they got it this afternoon. I mean, our approach, we just played flat. Game plan was not on point for execution. Decision making on offense was not very good. Got beat by a lot of hustle plays, transition, offensive rebounds, stuff like that. It just can't happen.
And again, that's probably nothing they didn't already know. They certainly need to bring more energy tonight. And I don't know if there's just a hangover from a 7-game series, a physical, long, emotional 7-game series against Denver. You'd like to think that you can just wash that away, come back 48 hours later, and do your thing. But, there's a cumulative effect of those long series. And I was concerned a little bit coming into this series just because of that and because the pace of this series is different. It's an every other day for all 7 games, every other day playing the games. They don't get those longer breaks like they've had along the way so far. But, fatigue shouldn't be as much of an issue. There shouldn't be that kind of mental hangover from the Nuggets series anymore. Now it's just, okay, you got beaten game 1. You didn't play particularly well. You still had a chance to win. You were up 4 with 3 minutes left despite not having great energy, despite not playing that well. Dallas could certainly play better tonight. That's the thing that they have to guard against. They can't be like, okay, as long as we play better, we'll win. Dallas can certainly play better. Dallas can certainly shoot better in this game than they did in that game. So the Wolves have to guard against feeling like just doing more will automatically result in a victory. They have to bring their A game. They have to bring their best tonight because this is, Denver series aside, it was unusual that Denver got back into that series after dropping the first 2 at home. And Denver certainly could have won that series up 20 in Game 7. They could have won that series after dropping the first 2 at home. Wolves, though, do not want to test the theory that they can still make it a series even if they lose the first 2 at home. They need, by all practical measures, they need to win this game tonight. That's what Finch's message is basically like right now, like, hey, whatever is going on in Game 1, it's got to stop right now. Got to win Game 2. If they do that, they reset the series 1-1, feel good about themselves and their chances of winning at least one in Dallas. And then you can kind of see the plot line play out where it's going to be kind of a long series, things like that. But it starts tonight, and I believe that's where Finch's message was coming from. Basically like, hey, right now, you got to do this right now. No messing around. No, you can't have a repeat of Game 1 in Game 2. There's no time to mess around right now, and we will see how they respond at Target Center tonight. Lynx play their home games at Target Center. You guys all know that. They were on the road last night, though, at Connecticut. Connecticut remains the last unbeaten team in the WNBA. Lynx would have held that title had they not lost in overtime. Nafisa Collier had a huge game, but missed a couple free throws down the stretch and committed a controversial foul with about 7 seconds left that led to the game-winning free throws for Connecticut. Connecticut wins by 1, leaving the Lynx to lament kind of missed opportunities, the bad call that they thought went against them on the foul. I saw it wasn't that great of a call. I don't think it was like a travesty of justice. You could argue that she got bumped, but it was not a good call. And all the missed free throws, things like that. But I think the bigger picture takeaway is that's a good team they played, and they've already won. They were already 2-0 going into this game. They've already played some tough, close games. 2 out of the 3 games have gone into overtime. I think this will be a competitive, good team as long as they can kind of maintain these things that they're doing well, kind of the battles, building around Collier, building around kind of a new identity with some of these new players they have. Should be a pretty good team this year. Like Kent Youngblood was saying before the season started, actually before the home opener last week when I had him on the show, just kind of like the new identity of this team. Toughness, defense, kind of getting back to the things that were hallmarks of the better versions of this team in years past that maybe slipped some last season. So, you never want to lose, but at this point in the season, when it's Game 3, the bigger picture is probably more important. The bigger picture, I think they have to be encouraged that they are going to be a team that can be competitive all season long. Let's talk Twins today with Bobby Nightengale Jr. from the Star Tribune. Bobby, you were on an eventful road trip. A lot happened, especially kind of end of the Cleveland series, early Washington series. You had the losing streak, got to 7 games after that really hot run of 17-3 play. What their score, I think you wrote 45-12 in those 7 games. This is like what a weird whiplash effect. They have the players only, clubhouse meeting after that 7th loss. You've got, Joan Duran questioning pitch selection, Rocco Baldelli saying, hey, maybe don't say that in front of everybody. And then they win 2 in a row. So what do we make of the swirl of this road trip and kind of where they are at right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of sums up their season so far, where it's kind of been a whiplash of, the 7-13 start. The next 20 games, they were probably the hottest team in the league, 17-3 record. I imagine that's probably, one of the best 20 game stretches in recent Twins history. And then you lose the next 7. So, I mean, it's one of those, every player's talked about it. I mean, it's one of those, they've never really been a part of it. I mean, if anyone's ever been a part of a 12-game winning streak, they've never experienced a 7-game losing streak that quickly right after it. So, just kind of shows you, the streakiness of baseball, but also their offense. I mean, that's been the theme. I mean, in terms of the poor start was offense came out cold. Partially that was due to it felt like they had an off day every other day and really never felt like they got into a rhythm of a season. This one felt a little bit more differently in terms of just the offense was flat for a week straight. And, that happens when you're only scoring 1 or 2 runs a game. You make it life impossible for your pitchers, and that's kind of what happened.
Did they have, I mean, obviously if they had a better explanation for it, it probably wouldn't have happened a second time, but like the streakiness of the offense certainly is, that's the story of the season, like you said, and to get to 26-23, which they are right now, which is not a bad record. It doesn't put them out of anything at this point and puts them right in that mix, but like just to get there in such a weird way, to have it be so up and down, have they been able to pinpoint, like, I think Rocco has pinpointed, it's like, it takes them a while to adjust during games sometimes. And how do those lapses kind of happen when they kind of know about them?
Yeah. I mean, I think you have a bunch of left-handed hitters that are struggling right now, and just kind of the totality of it is kind of adding up. Like you look at like Edward Julian, he obviously hasn't looked like himself for the last 3 weeks. Alex Kirilloff is struggling, and Rocco Baldelli's even mentioned anytime he's ever struggled like this before, it's usually because he's been hurt, and he's not hurt right now. There's no signs of an injury, so it's kind of the first real slump for him. It's the real first slump for Edward Julian. Matt Wallner got sent down, and Trevor Larnach's up, and Larnach's been okay, but he hasn't kind of set the world on fire. Max Kepler's been really good, but kind of had a little bit of a cold spell recently until he heated up in the wins versus the Nationals. So I think it's just one of those, a big part of their offense is, left-handed hitters having success. Those guys, I mean, especially Julian and Kirilloff and Kepler, they're going to rely on those guys against right-handed pitching all the time. So when those guys are cold and, you don't have a Royce Lewis in the lineup, I think that even though he doesn't have a ton of experience, I think that's when you feel it a little bit more, especially like when you're facing a lefty and you don't have him in the middle of the lineup. And even Ryan Jeffers was in a slump for a little bit. So I felt like it was just one of those, everyone went cold at one time, and that's where it kind of added up. There's adjustment issues too. I mean, in terms of, teams are throwing crazy amounts of off-speed pitches at the Twins hitters. Right. Twins to do really well against fastballs. And it's always a balance for pitchers, do what you do best versus the other team struggles at this and try to execute that game plan. And I think that's where Rocco's frustration is in terms of, guys that aren't great at throwing 80% off speed pitches are doing this and they're still having success. Like they shouldn't be having that level of success. So they got to do things to force the pitchers to kind of go back to the way to see more fastballs. And they started to do it at the end. Even in the last game against the Nationals, where they won 3-2, they had a lot of hard hit balls right at guys, and the at bats were a lot better compared to when they're getting blown out a few games before that.
Speaking of pitch selection, fastballs versus breaking balls, things like that, Joan Duran said after the last game in Cleveland, basically he gave up the walk-off home run, basically said, I'm paraphrasing here because I don't have it directly in front of me, basically saying maybe he thought a fastball was a better pitch in that situation. It's definitely his better pitch, but hey, if the scouting report tells you that, I just work here. I'm just an employee here. I'm going to do what I'm told, but it didn't work out great. And then next day, Rocco is basically saying, hey, you could say that beforehand. You can't really say that afterwards. He was surprised that Duran said that publicly, and basically said he thought it was because Duran was just frustrated that they were losing and that he'd given up the home run. What did you make of that kind of like 2-day story?
Yeah, I mean, I've covered frustrated closers before. That's kind of how it goes when they give up the homer. I mean, you give up a foul ball and that curve ball, you probably never hear about it post game,
Sure.
that he didn't want to throw that pitch. It's just the one pitch, the one outcome that he couldn't have, a homer right there, is what burned him. But when you're not convicted in a pitch, that's usually what happens at the big league level too. But yeah, I mean, even talking to like Christian Vasquez, who's the catcher, he was in that meeting. He said, we came up with the game plan to go with the curveball. It wasn't really brought up. Duran said he didn't try to shake it off afterwards. So I mean, it was one of those. I'm sure in his head, he said, he probably felt strongly. If you do feel that strongly, feel free to speak up. But teams do have game plans that come from the dugout sometimes. And Pete Maggie, when he makes those mound visits, a lot of times it's, hey, do this, do this, do this. And when it works, pitchers are very happy. When it doesn't work, usually it doesn't come out that publicly, but obviously that was the second home run he gave up on his curveball. Right. He gave up one to Jose Ramirez that he was okay with that pitch selection. He just didn't like the one to Will Brennan, but also, you could point to he gave up a walk right before that, and that's what put him in the bad position against Will Brennan. So I just think it was one of those. The frustration added up was the losing streak for Duran. He's really never really struggled in the closer role, and it kind of just built up into that. It wasn't one of those like you felt like the whole clubhouse was pissed off at the game planning and upset about something. It felt like it was more one guy was just venting and. I lean towards more Rocco's where it was like, he was frustrated with the situation versus our game planning doesn't work. And, we're not doing what our pitchers think we can, and we don't have the ability to shake off.
Right.
I saw a lot of internet takes, but I don't think it matched up with kind of how the situation aligned.
Do they have a good amount of decision latitude to shake off a pitch or to say, hey, I think a fastball is better in the situation, especially if the data that they're bringing to them from Pete Mackey and their scouting reports and Vasquez is telling them curveball here. How much do you think he can really say no fastball here?
I mean, it's one of those. He does have the opportunity, but it's also one of those. Don't throw a fastball and give up a home run on that either.
Right.
I mean, you better be right if you're going to make that call and kind of go rogue a little bit. Because I mean, you have to think about it. I mean, there's a lot of people on that Twin staff that people don't know about that are kind of behind the scenes that go into this daily.
Of course.
This is the hot zone. This is where you should throw your pitches. This is how it works, and dedicate a lot of time on how to attack hitters. So there's a lot of research into that. Pitchers shake off. I mean, you see it a lot more with starting pitchers.
Right.
But obviously with the pitch com, it's probably not as obvious anymore. So, I mean, they do have the latitude to do it. The Twins definitely do have game plan where Pete Mackey, the dugout, will give suggestions. And there's also the pitching cards in their pockets that'll tell them how to attack hitters. So it's all on their mind. But, I mean, it's also there's runners on first and second in a tie game. I mean, even if he gave up a single on a fastball, which maybe that was the right pitch, but give up a single on that, you lose the game too. So
right.
It was one of those, he had to get ahead. I didn't think it was a terrible pitch either. I mean, it was an inside pitch and Will Brennan just did a nice job hitting it out of the park. But I do think it's not a huge fight between players and the staff. I think it's more just that pitch just got away. And I was surprised to see it turn into such like MLB Network I saw was talking about it into a big debate about analytics versus whether pitchers have longitude. Because I think every organization does this too.
But it feels a little bit like when you see pitchers give up a hit against a shift, right? Like they're shifting all over and then like someone bleeds a single through one side and pitcher's like, oh man, that would have been a double play if not for the shift. And then you don't ever hear him talking about, oh, that shift, like, that was a good one. They saved me 2 runs there because that would have been a hit. Like it's the outcome-based guessing, I think, that second guessing that probably happens there. Although I get what Duran's saying. Like Duran's best pitch, I mean, he throws 100 miles an hour on his, on his worst days usually. He was a little slower the other day. I think his fastball in Washington was more like 98, 99, which is still plenty fast. Like he probably thinks like, hey, let me throw the heat or let me throw at least the, that change-up splitter, which is not a change-up in my book anyway. But like, I'm sure he's thinking that's my third best pitch on most days. Why am I throwing it? But it also, to me, is some of that, like, and you probably hear it all the time, like the pitcher's griping about the shift, but they're going to keep shifting because the data says, hey, 60% of the time this is going to work. Like you're trying to get all the edges you can get, and sometimes it's not going to work.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great example. Just obviously the shift's limited now, but when it was there, I mean,
Right.
it was definitely I thought that was kind of a relevant example. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just that was only the first pitch of the at bat too. I don't know if it was, hey, throw your first pitch curveball and keep throwing curveballs. I mean, I have no idea what the second pitch was going to be. If there was going to be like, okay, set up your fastball off the curveball or something like that. But yeah, I just think it kind of showed too. I mean, just kind of the frustration in terms of losing to the Guardians. It's kind of a division series. They know the importance of those games, how much those can add up at the end of the season. I think that added up too for Duran. But it was kind of funny, like post game. I mean, you heard like Rocco spoke, and he was obviously disappointed at the sweep. Duran spoke and was frustrated that he gave up the walk-off homer on the curveball. But the rest of the clubhouse, I mean, it wasn't like our season's over. We just got swept by the Guardians. This is the worst thing that ever happened. I mean, like Chris Paddock he threw eight innings and was happy with his performance. They kind of had a crazy top of the ninth where Byron Buxton scored on 2 errors and, basically saved the game with his legs. And, the rest of the clubhouse was, as far as, I wouldn't say upbeat, but I mean, as content as livable with a 3-game sweep as possible in terms of like, I didn't feel like there was anger inside the clubhouse in terms of how that, the Duran pitch went or anything else. I felt it was more like it was one guy who was upset.
Then, of course, they get routed the next day against Washington. Then they have the clubhouse, closed door, like, hey, guys, we're not playing good. We got to shape this up. I mean, those things could be kind of overblown. You probably don't want to have a players only meeting before Memorial Day, but I don't know if it worked or not, but they've won 2 in a row since then. What do you imagine, whatever you've learned from it, or just like what generally happens in these closed door meetings? Like, what do you think they were trying to get out of that?
Yeah, it sounded like, I mean, no one wanted to say who's the one who spoke up or anything, but it sounded like the message was just, hey, just relax. We're in this together. This is rough times kind of show who true people's character are. And, as Rocco said, I mean, he kind of called out the offense on his own. He wasn't in the players only meeting, but called out their approach. And he's like, hey, I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't think we were capable of being a good offense, and kind of criticizing the offense as much as he did. If it was a personnel issue, if it was a talent issue, he's like, I probably would have done a different approach, but the talent's there to, have success offensively. They're better than 12 runs in a week in a 7-game stretch. So I think it was just one of those players just trying to remind themselves, hey, I mean, think how fast it turned. I mean, they went from 1 week ago, it was you're the hottest team in baseball, to the next week after that, you just got swept by a division rival and the Yankees. And, now you're getting crushed by the Washington Nationals. And now it feels like your season's falling apart. So, it was a quick whiplash in a week. And I think it was just players trying to remind themselves, hey, just relax a little bit. The talent's here. It's in the room. Just try to focus on the game plan and focus on what you do well.
Do I have the timeline of the rally sausage right? So it was a big part of their 17-3 run. Like everyone's like, oh, this is kind of a fun thing. Like fans in the stands are bringing giant summer sausages and just like snacking on them, like some, like it's just a regular snack without anything else, which is whatever, to each their own. But they score 1 run against the Yankees in that last home series, and then they're like, we're not going to bring it with us to Cleveland. So they don't. And then they get swept by Cleveland. And then all of a sudden, they've lost 7 in a row by the time they lose that one to Washington. They're not scoring runs, 12 runs in 7 games. So it's continued from the Yankees series. So like, we got to get the sausage back. They get it back before they scored the 10 runs. Now they've won 2 in a row. But is that the rough timeline for the sausage?
It is. There's a debate on whether it was left behind accidentally and someone just forgot to bring it, or they got swept by the Yankees and it was like, okay, the power's gone. Well, we can do without it now. Right. But as soon as I think it was after they lost the second game to the Guardians, I think that was the blowout loss. They tried to get it there on Sunday, and mailing stuff on Sunday, it didn't show up until Tuesday. But that's the rough timeline is, right when he got back in the clubhouse, the offense finally came to life. And whether you want to believe in the power of the sausage or not, it's been there for a lot of wins.
It has. I can't imagine it's going away anytime soon, too, now that it's, reemerged and they win 2 in a row. I think it's kind of funny. Like, I have had plenty of sports superstitions over the years. Like, some of them,
extending into fandom where you have no control. But like if a player thinks something is lucky, like I even go back to 2002, the last time before last fall when the Twins had actually won a playoff series where they beat the A's and then got to play the Angels in the ALCS. Angels had the rally monkey that year, and it was like a big thing. It was a big deal. And it was like, of course, there's nothing to it. It's just a thing that kind of unifies the fans and the players and stuff like that. But if you believe in something, there is some power in it, even if a sausage isn't magical. Like, do you think that there's some like relevance to it, like something that kind of brings a team together, and if they think it's lucky, then in some ways it is lucky?
Yeah, I mean, I remember talking to like David Popkins, the hitting coach, when he was the one who first brought it to the dugout, and asking him why he did it. And he's like, hey, if they can talk about a sausage instead of just focusing about, being in a slump, being 0 for your last 14 for 30 minutes, that's a good thing. Sometimes, and Edward Julian's talked about it, like with his slump, he just thinks it's more mental. He's like, I overthink. I probably spend too much time in the batting cage when I'm slumping. And sometimes you just need to relax. And if it's like, okay, relax, the sausage has you. And if as long as you touch the sausage, you'll have success. It sounds silly in any other place besides sports. It probably wouldn't make sense, but if it works, it's not ridiculous.
Buxton hit 2 home runs. Is he a believer now?
Yeah, well, he told me, I mean, when they first brought the sausage out, he's like, I'm never going to touch that thing. He's it's going to bring fungus out. And he did. Yeah. He's like, he said he's a true believer now that he touched it. So
look at him now.
Once you hit 2 homers, I mean, you can't go against it.
No, you can't. A couple more things, Bobby. One, one of the storylines I kept bringing up going into the year was worrying about starting pitching depth, and I just didn't know what they had beyond the 5 they were going to open with. And then, of course, DeSclafani got hurt before they even broke camp early, so they started the year with the rotation they had. Then Louis Varland gets sent down. They bring up Simeon Woods Richardson, and you're like, how is this going to go? And, by and large, the rotation has been pretty good. Pablo Lopez, rough start the other day. Like his ERA is creeping up into the mid-4s, but he's had better starts than the one he had the other day and kind of got dinked and dunked to death a little bit in that game. Simeon Woods Richardson, though, is the one who kind of stands out. They didn't stretch him too far the other day with kind of a rested bullpen in the game coming up off day on Thursday, but just the lift he's given them as a number 5 starter, that has kind of held some of this together even when the offense has been so up and down.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those, even with your number 5 starter on the mound, he gives you a chance to win. And, not every team has that. When Louis Varland was struggling, you kind of felt like, okay, the way he was giving up runs, it was like, okay, they're going to have to grind out a lot of runs today. So, I mean, that's been a huge development in my mind. I mean, if you would have said going into the season, Louis Varland was going to struggle the way he has, Pablo Lopez wasn't going to be the Cy Young contender at this point, that they hoped he would be. You would have thought they'd be in more trouble than, they're still a top 10 rotation in baseball right now. You have to credit Joe Ryan. He's taken a huge step forward. Bailey Ober's taken, he's had 1 or 2 bad starts, but taking a large step forward. Chris Paddock's been solid for his last 4 or 5 starts. And then Woods Richardson, I mean, they talked him up in camp. About the arm slot difference he made. They're like, he's throwing a little bit harder. You just didn't know how much to believe in it.
I thought it was just talk. I really didn't believe in it. I didn't. And he's not striking a lot of guys out still, except for that, 1 or 2 starts, but he's been effective.
Yeah. And it was one of those, like, facing the Guardians, I thought was a great matchup for him, just being a team that they don't strike out much either, and being like, okay, how is he going to attack them? And, he had a deep start against the Guardians and then the short one against the Nationals, even though it was all shutout performance. I mean, you look at him, he doesn't have the stuff that like a Pablo Lopez sweep or a Joe Ryan fastball. He doesn't have those star-studded pitches, but keeps finding success. And then, as a number 5 starter, that's fantastic. And you look at like Louis Varland, he's having more success in AAA. That gives you depth. David Festa, the pitching prospect's been doing well in AAA. So starting rotation wise, I mean, injuries can always happen around the corner, but barring that, I mean, I think the Twins have to be as happy as they could be being this far in the season, just knowing DeSclafani's out for the year. Right. Pablo Lopez hasn't been all world at this point. So it felt like a lot of things went right in that department.
Yep. Final thing, you mentioned Royce Lewis a while ago, just in terms of like how much they still miss him. What's the timeline there on him? Because he's been out since, the third inning of game one.
Yeah, it sounds like Friday will be the last big hurdle for him. He's been doing a lot of baseball activities, like he's hitting on the field, hitting in the cages, taking ground balls. Friday is going to be the day he tries to run the bases pregame, and then you're going to try to make it as game-like situations as possible, ask him to sprint at full speed and things like that. If that goes well, I mean, you're looking at a rehab assignment pretty here shortly, maybe as early as the beginning of next week. So that'd be a huge step. I imagine a rehab assignment would be at least a week, maybe a little longer for a guy who's been out so far. He's only played one game, and you have to build your way up to playing 5 innings, 7 innings, 9 innings, that type of thing. But so I mean, if you're looking at possibly 2 weeks, best case scenario, Royce Lewis back in the lineup. I mean, talk about a huge lift for the Twins. And also another guy, Brooks Lee, kind of fell off the radar. He got hurt in camp with the back spasms. He began a rehab assignment in rookie ball. So I'd expect to see him in AAA pretty soon. So good news for the infield in terms of two guys that could make a difference in the summer, coming back relatively soon.
Absolutely. And I feel like this stretch of, almost 50 games now without Royce Lewis has kind of been about, can you stay relevant? He's not their only player, but he's a big hole in that lineup. Can you stay within shouting distance of everybody else until you kind of get that piece back? And it feels like they are on the cusp of at least doing that, 26-23, the hard way, like we talked about, but still with the record they have, feels like, they are definitely still in that mix. And with a homestand coming up with the Rangers and the Royals, Royals, another, AL Central foe that's playing pretty well this year.
Yeah, the Central's, I mean, better than expected.
Yes.
In terms of, the competition in front. Guardians have had a ton of injuries, especially their starting rotation, like Shane Bieber's out. I saw Gavin Williams and other starters out. Tristan McKenzie's dealing with an elbow thing and still pitching through it. So the fact they're as good as they are has been quite impressive. And the Royals have kind of slid under the radar in my mind, but their pitching is a heck of a lot better than it was last year. And I saw they won their 30th game, I think, sometime recently, and they didn't win 30 games until mid-July last year. So, heck of a turnaround for them.
Absolutely. Bobby, appreciate it. I have no idea what sort of direction the Twins will be going next time I talk to you, but I'm looking forward to it whenever it is. Follow Bobby's coverage, Star Tribune, startribune.com, and we'll talk to you soon, Bobby.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Great stuff from Bobby. Check out our feature, Star Tribune, startribune.com, on David Festa. Bobby and I talked a little bit about him, but he's really showing some potential in St. Paul. Bobby wrote about him today. He had 5 struck out 10 batters a few weeks ago. Couple different games. He's kind of cruising through AAA batters right now. Probably next guy up, or could be next guy up if the Twins need more help. Like Bobby talked about, both he and Louis Varland are having some success lately. So check that out, Star Tribune, startribune.com. Let us finish with the cooler quickly. Talked a lot of PWHL Minnesota on Thursday's show with Rachel Blount, but Game 3 is tonight. 1-1 in that finals series with Boston. All sorts of storylines abounding in that game, like Rachel and I talked about. But, when you've got a best of 5 and you're tied 1-1, you can obviously tell the importance of this game. Winner will be in the driver's seat to win the first PWHL championship. Can Minnesota's run continue, this great run where they turned their season around? They lost their last 5 regular season games, lost their first 2 playoff games, on the brink of elimination, then win 3 against Toronto, split these first 2 with Boston. Can they get it done in Game 3 tonight during, like we said, a very busy night in Minnesota sports? That'll do it for me for now. Won't say for today, because like I said, planning to do a bonus episode off of Game 2 tonight, so stick around, listen for that later. Until then, I am Michael Rand, and we will talk to you again later.